One. Hey yo! Welcome back to another episode of the ArtsBlock podcast. I'm your host, Eric Curry III, and today, guys, I don't think y'all know how big of a deal we have on the podcast today, but we have somebody that's Grammy nominated. Grammy nominated. We have someone who I've basically grew up around. Basically, I was in his studio all the time, at least once a week, with my mama, and we have just an amazing human being overall, husband, father, producer, entrepreneur. Give it up for Yudu Gray Jr., ladies and gentlemen.
Dang.
Give it up, give it up, give it up.
I need to carry you around with me, man, so you can introduce me everywhere. Sheesh.
Oh man. First things first, how are you doing today? How are you?
Blessed. I'm great, man. How you doing?
I love that. I'm great, amazing. Glad we getting this.
Of
Glad we getting this
course.
done.
Not
Right.
too many people can get me on camera. You one of the few, so
Oh man, I love that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's just get right into this, man. So one thing that I didn't know about you is that you lived in London
I did.
for like for the first long years of your life. First couple
Yeah.
years of your life. Lived in London, right? How was that experience? How was living in London? How was that?
It was good. My wife, Davina, and I, we always talk about, like, I think exposure opens your mind to what's possible.
Right.
So it's little things. Like London's a really old town, right? It's their history goes back centuries.
Right.
So when you learn in a place like that, you learn history in a very different way than you do in Africa or you do in America. And I've been blessed to live in, parts of Africa, been blessed to live in London and
Right.
then blessed to live in parts of America.
Mhm.
So I was able as a kid to kind of learn about, both ancient history and modern history in London or in
Right.
England. And then I came to America when I was 12 and I was learning a lot of the same history, but from a different perspective.
Right.
And so that caused me to, I think, question things because, as a kid, if you don't know any better, you kind of listen to adults and your teachers. And if they tell you something, it's a fact.
Mhm.
But what happens when you go to school in one place and they tell you history from one side, and you go to school in another place and they tell you history from the other side, and it's two
Right.
different histories?
Mhm.
So then you start questioning, like, well, if they're not right, then, like, there's two sides to every story and there's more than one truth. And then once you kind of start understanding that,
Mhm.
then it just makes you question, like, everything. It's why I question, like, should I go to college or should I,
Right.
like, all the things that were just kind of like standard.
Mhm.
I think it just forced me to grow up questioning a lot of things. But I loved it. It was fun times. I moved there when I was shit. I don't know, give me a line 8 or 9, and we lived there till I was 12.
Mhm.
I actually lived in DC first. So I was born in Liberia.
Right.
I moved to DC before I was 1. I lived in DC from like 1 to 5,
Right.
and I was in Liberia from 5 to 8 or 9,
Mhm.
and then I was in London from 8 or 9 to 12, and then Atlanta, Georgia, then up to the DMV, and that's
Right.
yeah,
So what do you know? Like, have you ever talked to your parents? Like, what caused the move from
yeah,
Liberia to London?
yeah. So there was a war. I remember it. Liberia had a civil war in the late '80s, 1989,
Mm.
and so I guess now it's closer to like 7. 89, 90. And my dad was in the government. He was a high level government position person. So when the war happened, they didn't think it was going to last that long. It was a coup.
Right.
So it was like an internal war. It wasn't like another country invading. It was
Mhm.
members of the military were overtaking the government. And so the government and officials kind of left the country for a little bit while things were dying down. And the whole idea was like, oh, well, we'll just be in London for like a couple weeks. So
Right.
my parents went ahead. I stayed with my grandmother, my dad's mom. And
Mhm.
then when the war got closer and closer, we finally fled the country like right before things went really bad.
Mhm.
And again, even after we left, it was always like we almost lived out of a suitcase because it was like, oh, the war is going to end. And as soon as it ends, we're going to go back home.
Right.
So that's 1989, 90. And it's now 2021. And the war ended like 10 years ago. So it was like we became like refugees without knowing we were refugees at first. And then once it was like, oh, okay, now we got to figure out what's going on.
Right.
That's how we ended up in America, because my pops and like my family ran out of money. Like
Mhm.
It's really expensive in London,
Yeah.
and when you're just living and not making any money like that, the money's going one way. So then we finally moved to America where we had more family and kind of had to restart our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Was that like you being so young and going through that? How scary was that for you during that time?
Uh,
If you can remember, because that was long
Nah, I definitely remember. I'll say this: like, I didn't remember how I didn't realize how close we were to the war. Like, I remember the bombs going off at night, but it
ago.
was weird. It was like I remember like at night you would hear bombs and fighting, but
Mhm.
in the daytime it was like regular. You'd go to school, you'd go to the market. Like it
Right.
was like two worlds, and it's funny like what's happening now. It kind of is the example of like watching on TV people rioting in the city and knowing like it's not right outside your window, but you know it's nearby, but
Right.
you don't feel threatened because it's like when you see rioting, it's like, oh, okay, well, they're burning down, downtown Atlanta, but we live, 20 minutes from there.
Right.
But it was like, imagine if that happened, and then one day they're like, oh, no, they're rioting like down the block, and then it's like, oh, no, they're at your gate.
Mhm.
That's how it inched closer and closer and closer. And
Right.
again, because my pops was in the government,
Mhm.
we were at risk because the people taking over the government were trying to kill the people who were in the government.
Right.
But I didn't realize the severity of it and how like involved we were in it until I was much older, and
Mhm.
I realized like, oh, like that could have been really bad. And then you start meeting people who didn't get out, right, and people who had to live through the war, and people who we all lost people who saw people get killed, and
Mhm.
you can only be thankful. So for me, it was like even though I was aware of it as I got older and I asked more questions and more importantly got more answers,
Mhm.
it always made me feel a sense of like I'm thankful because like it could have gone the other way, and why did God spare me
Mhm.
when I could have been stuck there and or killed or anything?
No, cause you made house.
Huh? Yeah, exactly. You,
Cause you made
you got a
house.
purpose. You better do something with it.
Right. Exactly. And I want to go. Well, before I get to that, I want to get to just you and music in general. Right. I feel like you and music have like this special connection, this special ongoing connection. I see you working with Manny Wells. I see what you're doing. Um,
Nah,
but
that's
not like, but seriously though, like you and music have had this special connection. Where did that connection begin? Have you ever like fell out of love with music? Have you had to fall back in love with music? Let me know. I want to know.
that's a great question. So where it began, as long as I can remember, music was a fabric in life. So I lived with my grandparents early on with my mom and my grandparents in DC.
Right.
And like, like most black families, Saturdays you cleaning, you playing the records. So
Mhm.
early 80s in DC, you're playing Marvin Gaye, you're playing Stevie Wonder. It's like earliest memories, the happiest times are always connected to music in some way.
Yeah.
Then when I moved with my pops, and I moved to Africa, moved to Liberia, my dad had a keyboard. He had an organ actually in the house. And
Right.
I just remember like it was like the one thing in the room that was like off limits in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
But a kid, if you tell a kid you can't
You
touch
want
something,
it.
that's the
You
like
want it.
that's the one thing you got to touch. So when he would go to work or whenever I was home alone, and I mean, doing the math, I was like 5 years old. So I'm like, I look at my kids now, realizing like at my kids' age, playing the keyboard was like there was no internet, there was no like iPad, so it was like in the daytime you got to find stuff to do.
Mhm.
If I could sneak and play the organ for like 10 minutes, that was like the greatest day. And very early on, I think my pops and my family realized like I could play by ear. So even at like 5, 6, 7, I could hear a note and copy it. I could hear a tune and copy it. And so it was always like a language for me. Like it was always fun. And then over time, it just became like it was an escape. I never thought I'd be in music. I like you could have never told me in high school like I'd be involved in mute like
Right.
because I loved it too much. I didn't even think you could make. I never looked at it as a career option. It was
Right.
always an escape from realities. Like that's what I go do when I'm stressed. That's what I go do when I want to get away.
Right.
And then I've always loved business. I've always loved how things work. So business to me is just problem solving. I love solving problems.
Right.
So when I learned how to like solve the problem of the business of music
Mhm.
and learned that I could do it with musicians and with artists and I could make a living doing that, that was like I felt like I won a lottery. It was like I would have paid to do that.
Yeah.
Hey,
Whew. You did win the lottery in a
I
way.
did.
In a
I
way,
did.
like you like I feel like you won an emotional lottery. right? It
Man,
wasn't.
that's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, you want an emotional lottery, right? You got to do well. You're still doing what you love,
Hmm.
right?
Every
Your
day.
first love at that.
Yeah.
People go through a million things. Like this is my first love. Nah, this is nah, this, not this. Like you found something. You was like, nah, this,
Yeah.
and that's crazy. So when did it click to you, right? That oh snap, I know business, I know music. What if I just like combine the two?
Put them together.
Yeah.
I was 27 years old,
Hmm.
and I was in like a fork in the road in life. I could go get a job, a career. I was still an athlete at the time, so I could like double down and try to like do more in that world. But I really didn't love that. And I talked to my uncle, who's like my closest advisor. It's actually his birthday today. When he sees this, it won't be, but happy birthday, Uncle Owen.
Yeah.
And I was like, like, I'm stuck. Like, what do I do? And he's like, what do you love? And I was like, I don't know. Like you said, like the lottery. But I was like, I don't know. How do you answer that? He's like, well, let me ask you this. What do you do when no one's watching? What do you do like in your free time? And I was like, oh, I play music. He's like, well, go figure out how to make music, how to play music and do that for a living.
Right.
So I was like, all right. So the first thing I did was I went to a studio. I'd interned at this studio as part of like a high school program back in the day.
Right.
The owner then was now the new owner at the time was just like an engineer in the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother actually, I think he had ran into him, was like, oh, I seen this dude Damon, you should hit him up. So I go out there and I get an internship. And I was like, yo, I'm 27.
Mm-hmm.
I'm old as hell to be an intern.
No.
But I got a bunch of skills. I know music. I don't really know how to engineer. I don't really know much, but I think I could learn and I can add value. And I just went there with the intent of like answering the question my uncle asked me, which is like, go figure out how to make money doing what you love.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna just be around music and figure out how to make money. And just being around it. Again, I didn't go there saying I'm gonna learn the business or it was more so what's the problem? And that's, once you see a problem, you try to solve it. That's all business is. It's like, I'm just going to try to solve this problem really well. And the problem at the time was, again, this is late 2000s, was there's a bunch of independent artists who don't have the structure and the support of a major label. So let me create the structure and the support as if it's a major label, but for independent artists. And if I can start there, then I can grow the business of music. And so to do that, I had to understand how business worked in music. So I was like a sponge. I would sit and ask questions. I'd sit with the managers. Like we work with the biggest artists in the world. And I would never sit and talk to the artists. I would talk to their managers. I'd talk to their lawyers. I'd talk to their agents because I wanted to know what the business was like. And when I talked to the artists, it'd be cool, fun, daps.
Yeah.
But with the people who were actually like cutting the checks and writing checks, I was like, yo, how does that work? How does touring work? How does publishing work? What is royalties? What are these words? And as I started putting it together, the internet's kind of solving problems in different industries. I was like, oh, well, I think like I could use these tools to solve these problems. And then that's literally how House was born. I was like, what if I just apply what that's doing to music?
Right. That's insane. You kind of saw the problem before people saw the problem.
Yeah, a lot of people weren't talking about it then. I remember when I first got into it, I have a cousin who's really successful in music. And when I told him I was starting a studio, he's like, cuz don't like if you cherish your sanity, don't. There's no money, no one's making money in music. Everyone can record at home. There's no need for studios anymore.
Right.
And I was like, no, there is. Like maybe not for some artists, but for a large group of artists, they need a place to call home.
Right.
And that's where the word house came from. Like, yo, let's build a spot that's like the home for artists. Well, the home starts with like the structure, which is the house. So we're going to call it House Studio. And then, when we built it, a lot of people again were like, nah, there's no money. And I was like, nah, it's coming. Like someone's going to solve something. I didn't know Spotify was going to come. I didn't know Apple Music was coming, but I knew the solutions were coming because we saw it in real time.
Yeah. Those DSPs. But that's crazy because now everybody's like fighting for independent artists and everybody's fighting to get their masters and give me what I deserve. That's crazy. You were kind of the person that was like, nah, we need to give these people what they deserve for that. Has this ever happened to you? Like, have you ever was like, man, we need to fight for independent artists and somebody said, Yudu, shut up. I'm like,
oh yeah. Nah, I mean, shoot, I got job offers from almost every major label.
Man.
And when I'd go, sit in the interviews, they'd say, yeah, so this is our deal structure. This is what we want you to do. Come in an A&R or come in to do this. And I'd be like, y'all ever think about, doing more favorable splits? Like, some of those deals at the time were like 88-12, meaning like for every dollar that came in, 88 cents went to the label, 12 cents went to the artist. And then the artist recoupables and all the money they owed came from their 12 cents.
You know how you're shaking them people's boots by asking them to do that?
But I was trying to explain to them that like I felt like if you look at the numbers, right, at that time a major label might sign 10 acts a year.
Right.
And they might put all this money on 10 people for 2 of them to make them their money back. Right. And I was saying if you made it more favorable, you could actually spend less money per artist and make more money, because take the same 20 million you're going to spend this year, and instead of giving it to 10 people, which is 2 million a person, do like $500,000 and give it to more people and do a 50-50 split. Make it a true partnership.
Right.
And now I think if you pick the right group of people, I think you'll end up with more people who are streaming and selling and selling tickets and selling merch and doing film deals. Like that was the future. And again, a lot of them, I just feel like when it's all it's hard when someone comes along. It's like, I think it could be done different. But that again stems from like growing up in different cultures and different countries at different periods of my life. Right. It's very hard for me to just see a system and say, oh, okay, I'm going to do it because everyone says that's the way to do it. So when they're like, oh yeah, artists just give up their masters, I would say, well, why? Like, and it's like, oh, well, that's just how it's done. Like, nah, it feels like there should be another way. Why would you give away the thing that you created? Right. It never should belong to anyone else but the artist. Right? That just makes sense to me. It's not, like, it's not like a painting that I'm painting and handing to someone else. It's a song. It lives forever. I created it. So, we didn't have all the answers, but we knew there was a problem. And I think that was kind of, I won't say like I had the answers before everyone else. I just think we were very vocal in knowing that there was a problem.
Right. But okay. Do you think if those major labels, right, you went to was like, hey, this is the way you should be doing things? Because it's crazy how you said, like, well, that like this is the future when now is the future. Like now is the future. So do you think that, listen, if those labels would have listened to you, right? But then again, like, who are you to be listened to?
Exactly. I was 20-something year old, like, I had no industry experience. I hadn't broken a record. I'd interned for people. So it's like, they would have been crazy to listen to me.
Like, but you were right. You were right. Who would have known that a 27-year-old with no music business experience at all, with nothing, would have been right? Yeah. Looking in 2021, you were 100% right. So do you believe that now, currently in 2020, if those labels would listen to you back then, that music would be in a better place now? Like the business of music would be in a better place now?
I don't know if I can say it'd be better. I'll say this. I think the labels wouldn't be the bad guy. Because right now what's happened is with the shift, now the labels have become the bad guy. You don't hear artists saying, oh man, I just signed to Sony or I just signed to Warner. Like in the early 2000s, it was a huge deal for an artist you knew. Like when Wale signed, like that was like, we were like, your pops, like we were celebrating that. That was like, we made it because it was like a stamp. Yeah. The labels don't have that stamp effect anymore. Right. So it's like, now you say everybody's now saying independence, right? It's almost taboo to be signed. People are signing and not telling people because they're ashamed of it. So I don't know if the industry would have been better, but I think the labels would have been in a better position because now it's going to take a lot of work for the labels to undo the damage that everyone's paid attention to.
Right. Okay. All right. Woo, got into a little tangent there.
All right. Good questions, man.
Yeah. But house, right? All right. So to all the viewers out there, right? I have spent some of my best moments in house studios. I learned that's what she said, man. I learned what that meant. This was like that was like a terrible thing to start off with. Just keep up.
That's Inqua. If he's watching this, goddamn Inqua.
I learned what that meant. Like, just keep up with me though, right? Met people, seeing things, man. I'm just running from different studios, hearing different music. That it really enhanced my musical ear, being around all of y'all in that one space, and especially the old house, that small little space, but it was so great to be around that energy. Is that what you have planned? Was that what you have envisioned, or was that like more than what you planned?
I mean, I don't want to say planned because it's like we knew. So how house started was I was working at another studio called Avalon, the spot that I went to learn.
Right.
And like my cousin said, before we started house, a lot of the major studios were closing. Avalon was one of the top 3 studios in the DMV, and it was struggling at the time when I took it over. So, you know, when the guy who ran it said, "Yo, I'm closing shop. If you can come up with the money to buy it, you got it. But if not, I got to sell it." I didn't have the cash. Now I understand business. I would have gone and got the money, but everything happens for a reason. So at that time, I had a Rolodex of artists, both nationally and locally. I knew how to engineer. I had a skill set. I had trust with people in the community. Right. And so I was like, all right, well, let me just start another studio. And so that's how we started house. It was more so just like the place I was working just closed. I don't really want to, you know, before I started house, I went to the other major studios and was like, hey, let me come work at your spot. I got some ideas. Same thing with the labels. And they were like, nah, we're good. Like, again, because now everyone's into like hip hop and auto tune and plugins but again, 2007, 8, 9, like what home studios wasn't even a thing yet. So when they looked at me, I just represented hip hop, and most of those studios did not want hip hop acts in their studios.
Right.
So when I was like, man, I got 100+ artists and I'm sure. I ran a studio, so I know how many people have come to me and said that, but I really could do it.
Right.
So when we started house again, our goal was really just to get to the next month. We literally started with no money and was like, yo, we got 30 days to pay rent. Let's go. But I knew like we had to deliver an experience because we didn't have the history. We didn't have the Grammys. We didn't have the awards. We didn't have the experience. So like the only thing I could make sure when people come here, they have so much fun that they want to come back. Right. If we can just deliver on that every time, make it the best experience possible, our business will be okay. I didn't know it would be as magical as it was. I didn't know the magic was the people. So, like you said, that small little space in an alley in Northeast DC, in the hood, became the epicenter of music in DC. Not because I said it was, but because this magical group of people came together who really were all about the same energy of like, let's just do something really dope. Let's just like 2 a.m. Like I remember like you and Jaden sleeping on like chairs and like we're in rooms producing and making records that end up getting on a Wale project or end up getting on a, Roddy MC project and then like the Logic project. It's like all these artists were coming up at the same time. Wale's doing his thing and Tabby's killing it and EXO and them are doing well. And it was like all these guys and then like, all right, this guy Meek Mill comes through and now Pusha T comes through. It's like, we didn't plan for that. We just knew if we just made the vibe right. That people would want to be there. We never in our deepest thoughts thought, man, if we do this right, like T.I. is going to pull up one day. But he did. Like that ended up being the cool thing. But the real cool thing to me was outside of the celebrities, the people who were there on an average day. That was the magic. The Inkwells and the Dave Knox and the Jakes and that group of people, the Murphs, like.
Shout out to Murph.
Shout out to Murph. I just talked to him yesterday. That's like, that was the magic. Because I loved it because I felt like I was the least talented person in the building. Like Simon Kim's editing our videos. Like this is like
shout out to Simon. Simon's killing it right now. Yeah,
it's like an Emmy winning producer, editor, like killing our YouTube content. Before YouTube content was a thing, we're shooting and editing and putting stuff out on YouTube. It's like, but we weren't doing it because there was no monetization. Like our Instagram and Twitter and all that was popping before that was a thing because it was just like all this dope shit we were creating. It was like, we got to do something with it. Well, let's put it out. And that became our calling card. Like, damn, I wonder what's going on at house today. Because every day it seemed like something crazy was going on.
Right. I blame y'all, right? The whole, and my mama, the whole House Studios DC, that whole era, right? And my mama, I blame y'all for why I don't want to work a 9 to 5. Y'all made that being y'all job was like the coolest thing ever to me. I was like, wait, so y'all get to sit here and make music all day, and nobody like your parents don't fuss you out because you got to go to school. Y'all ain't got no bedtimes. Y'all just sitting here and make music. Okay. like this. I really like this, right? So I blame y'all for why I don't want a job, cause man, just seeing that, then being like, nah, I want to work like a 9 to 5. What? Are you sick? Are you crazy? But I feel like this would be a great time for a little story time for everybody that's new watching the ArtsBlock podcast. Hello, I'm your host Eric Curry III, and story time is like something new that we're doing here, where the artist on the pod gets to tell a little story. And I would like to hear your favorite memory at house. Right? There's been a lot.
Ooh,
your favorite
memory? I don't even know. I'll pull one that jumps out at me because it became a catchphrase for the entirety of our time at house.
Right.
So our big thing was we wanted to be the cleanest studio in the world, right? Like I've been to dozens of studios, and the one running thing with studios where they were all filthy, right? The engineers were dirty, they didn't shower, bathrooms stank, the carpets had never been changed, like people smoked. So like I was like, all right, well, if nothing else, we're gonna be clean.
Right.
I don't know where I was this day, but I left, like I wasn't in the building, which wasn't a normal thing. And I get a call from someone saying, yo, B.o.B's in town. And B.o.B at this point is like hot. He's like one of the biggest. It's like Bruno Mars B.o.B, like that B.o.B. It's like, yo, B.o.B's in town, and he heard about house. He wants to come through. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I get back to the studio, and it is dog. It is like disgusting. Like, no, like it's never been this dirty before. Wow. And I just went off on the team, and I was like, yo, like, B.o.B will be here in 30 minutes. Y'all got to get this joint spotless. And when I say the team worked, they were like magical elves. Like, they turned that and built it around in like 18 minutes flat. You would have thought it was a brand new building. The floors were shiny. Like, they mopped, swept, dusted, cleaned, Febreze, Lysol, Armor All. Like, it was the cleanest that building had ever been. And so B.o.B walks in, and the first thing his team says, his DJ, TJ, was like, damn, this joint is dope. This like a hotel or a nightclub. And so everybody smiled and looked at me and was like, told y'all we was going to clean it. And so from that day on, we called that B.o.B Clean. Like, if you ever see Jake, just be like, hey, Jake, what's B.o.B Clean? And you'll see like dread come over his face, because that was like, that set the standard. Because once they did that in that short period of time, I was like, oh, y'all never have an excuse again. This building has to always be clean. Right. Because y'all have just shown me that y'all can clean an entire building in like 18 minutes. And like, when I say clean, that jump, like, you could have eaten off the toilet. Like, it was like spotless. So B.o.B Clean, that's probably one of my favorite moments, just because like it also showed the power of our team. Like, we did the impossible every week in that building. That team, like, I've worked with a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of groups, and that team is still near and dear to my heart, because like we did the impossible over and over again.
Yeah, it was magical. That building was magical. The creativity was the creativity was magical.
Yeah.
Right. And again, like I don't think it was y'all's intentions to inspire like me and Jaden, right? Like, cause now even though this is like really like. This is like, it's just weird how this comes full circle. I'm just kind of like building off of what I learned, being like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, just being around. Like, I'm just building off what I learned. And while at the time it probably wasn't y'all intentions for just like, oh no, this is just Lil E, he cool, whatever. Like, he's just gonna be here, right? But I was really soaking up information like, oh no, this is Logic. Oh no, this is what you do with Logic. Oh, Simon taught me how to use Adobe. I was like, oh, Simon taught me how to like write scripts on Adobe. I started writing scripts. So all of that just kind of molded like who I am and like the creative being that I am today. Yeah. So really, I owe all of that to you guys. Like, y'all.
That's your mom and your pops, because you was there. You got double dose. Your mom would be there working with half the projects. Your pops would be there working on half the projects. So you were there just as much as Jaden. And yeah, that was not our intention. Yeah. We were more worried because we knew how vulgar our language was. And like you said, that's what she said in the jokes and all that. But I love it. Again, that's all exposure. And that's why, like, even now in life, a lot of what we do is we try to get people of all ages exposed to more things because we see the power in that. We didn't understand that then, but we see the power in it 11 years later, where it's like, if more people who are young, people of color, women were exposed to not just the arts, but just different things, what would the world look like? Like how, like you said, you don't want a 9 to 5 because you know something else exists. So you got to think there's so many people who don't even know that something else exists.
Right.
What happens if those people know? Again, owning your own business isn't for everybody, but there's somebody out there right now who's built for it, and they don't even know that's an option.
Message.
Right. What was your welcome to the music business moment? Like when everybody has one. Everybody who's like really deep into music has one. I want to know like yours, like where you was just like, oh snap, nah, like this, like everything was fun and games, but whoa.
That's an easy one. So when I went to Avalon, we worked with Def Jam, and Def Jam was probably like our number one client at the time as far as like feeding us work.
Big boy label.
Yeah. And at that time, this is like, Def Jam's, killing it.
Yeah.
And we had a good relationship with them. So when they'd come down, we had different rooms. We play beats, play tracks, play ideas. And I produced. Like at the time, I really just wanted to be a producer. I wasn't thinking business or nothing.
Right.
And this was pretty early on too. And there was a day where I played a record for a group of guys from Def Jam. Some A&Rs, some producers. Everyone was playing records, but I played records. I played this one record, and everyone in the room was like, oh, that's a joint. Like that joint goes. So one of the guys in the room he's actually still in the industry now and pretty high up. He was like, "Oh man, like let me see that joint. I'm gonna go pitch that joint. See if I can get you placement." Again, I never had a placement. I didn't know what a placement was.
Right.
You just like, wait, like I do this for fun on my own. You talking about playing the records for people? Cool. He's like, yeah, I know 50 Cent, I know this, know that. Cool. So a couple months passed by, and then I'm listening to the radio and I hear the beat play, and I'm like when it's your song, like the first note, the joint play, and I'm like, yo, what's this? And they're like, yo, it's that new da-da-da. I won't say the artist name. I won't put nobody on blast. And I was like, what? He's like, nah, this that so-and-so. Nah, it can't be. Like, that's my track. Go back, pull up the computer, press play. I go find the joint, press play. I'm like, yo, they just tweaked a little bit, but that's my record. Like, that's my beat. So I called the dude, no answer. Called the dude, no answer. Send him an email, no answer. Send him an email, no answer. So finally, I go to his boss because his boss is who booked the time with us.
Right.
I was like, yeah, trying to get in touch with your man, a record that I played, da-da-da. And his boss responded and was like, is there proof of this? Do you have proof of this? And I didn't. And what the way he asked it, though, was almost like, if you have proof, we can have a combo. If you don't, you wasting your time.
Right.
And I was like, oh, like you said, it's not sweet. Like, I get it. Because that record played on the radio for years. Like, that would have changed my life. And like, that would have changed a lot of things for me. That would have given me a major placement with a major artist.
Right.
Would have got me publishing checks. I would have gotten a publishing deal. Like, but I'm glad it didn't happen because I didn't want to be in that system in the long run. That was before I really understood the business of music.
Right.
That actually was the trigger that made me say, let me learn about the business of music. Because like next time that can't happen. I didn't know what a master was. I didn't know what publishing was. I didn't know what a royalty split was. I just made music for fun. I'd been doing that my whole life. So when this record gets taken, and I didn't realize the money. And then when my mentor, Paul Miner, was like, he used to call me Genie Ass, like genius, but Genie Ass. He'd say, Genie Ass, that record probably making that dude $15,000 a month right now. And I was sick. Because I'm eating ramen noodles and like Arizona iced teas and like literally scraping by $2 to my name, and the record I created is on the radio. But on the flip side, it also let me know that I made music that people appreciate. So that's why I felt confident moving forward, because I was like, well, he like that. I can make 100 of those. Like I know what works then.
Right.
And the funny thing is, I saw the producer years later, and he tried to play like he didn't know me. He did me with a dap, like, hey, nice to meet you. And I was like, nah, like we met. Avalon back in the day in Maryland. And he looked at me, and I think he realized who I was. And I was like, "No, it's all good, man. I love what you're doing. Keep it up."
Right.
And it was just that's all. Because again, you chalk it up to the game. It is what it is.
15K,
and it worked out. It worked out in our favor.
15K a month. I'm sorry, that number just kept replaying in my head.
Trust me, it did for me too. I was broke as a joke back then.
Woo! Man, I'm sorry. That was a moment.
Yeah, that's all good. I've heard worse. I've met a lot of people who signed contracts and got the placement and were stuck for 7-8 years and couldn't do anything. So my story is one where I learned the first time, and it put me in a position to win after that.
Right. But let's go on to something positive.
Amen.
The positive. So a little birdie told me, right, that somebody, I don't know, just a little rapper named Rhapsody, I don't know, then like some other producer, just I don't know, Ninth Wonder, just somebody little, right? They came to house. They just wanted to, Rhapsody just wanted to record a verse or whatever for man, what's his name? I think his name's like Kendrick Lamar or something. I don't know. He signed to like TDE or something. I don't know. I'm not that familiar. But but when you got that call, right? Like, hey, yeah, wait. First of all, what was the call? How was that? What?
It was. So the funny thing is, so Ninth's my brother. That's big bro. I'm gonna send this to him when we put it out. Hey, he comes to DC, or used to come to DC every year for his birthday in January. So it was like a running thing every year. He got a lot of family, a lot of friends there. He come to DC, hang out. He'll do a studio session, and then he'll go back to Carolina. So we'd been together a couple times before during this little run. And then this time when he called, he was like, "Hey, bro, I'm in town. I got you tickets for the party, but I also need a favor. We recording the joint, but can't nobody be in the studio." And Ninth's not Hollywood. So when he said that, I was like, all right, I got you. He was like, "Yeah, so we're going to pull up, but nobody can be there." I was like, no problems. So then he calls me like 2 times again. He's like, "Hey, nobody's going to be there, right?" I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm good." Because I think at the time they were thinking maybe Kendrick might come through, or they weren't sure, or whatever the case is. But finally, when they get there, he was like, "Yeah, we'll engineer it ourselves. We don't need any help, but we're working on something, and nobody can listen to it, nobody can hear it." Right. So Kendrick's super secret with his projects. He's like Cole, like that class of artists. Right. They don't do snippets, they don't do previews, they don't do leaks. And then when the joint dropped, Ninth texted me, was like, "Hey, like I'll send you the details, but this joint's special." And then like a couple months later, he was like, "Hey, how you spell house? Like, how do you want to spell it? Like, what credits do you want?" It's like, "For what?" He's like, "For that song we worked on is for Kendrick's project." It's like, "Kendrick Lamar?" He was like, "Yeah." Like, all right. I sent him the info, and then they sent a copy of the physical vinyl over, and we were in the credits. And obviously Rhapsody killed that joint. Ninth engineered it, and Complexion was on the To Pimp a Butterfly joint. That joint did big numbers. It Grammy winning, Grammy nominated, Grammy everything. So top album of the year.
So when you heard that, like, y'all was Grammy nominated, right? What was that like? So previously in the podcast we was talking about how you was like, yeah, I'm not Grammy nominated, I didn't have nothing, so we're just building this, right? Now you're there. You're that's the creme de la creme of awards in music. Yep. What was that?
It felt good. I felt really good for the team, because when we first started House, we didn't have the money to pay people. We didn't know what we were doing. Right. So I just remember I promised everybody that if they worked hard, it would pay off. Like if you put in the work, if we work together, if we can be selfless, like if we can put the team first, that we will win. And when one of us wins, we all win. So when I got the word like, "Yo, I think this joint's going to be Grammy nominated," we were excited then. Then when the day dropped and it was like 5-time Grammy nominated, like album of the year, record of the year, hip hop album of the year, it's like that to me was more for the team. Like, yo, y'all did it. Like, y'all built this. Like, y'all built a spot. Like, there's thousands of studios in the world. Like, people of that caliber are choosing to come and work in your space. You got to be proud of that, because that means that, like you said, it's as big as it gets. So if they want to work out of your space, and Grammy records have come out of the microphones that you use every day, the console, the speakers, then now that sets the bar for you. If you work out of this space, you don't have any excuses. Because like you said before, we could have used excuses,
right?
But we use that as motivation. Now you don't have excuses. Now you just have motivation, because you can't say, well, I need better mics, or I need, like, they did it out of what you have. So now go get it. So that to me was like, it set the bar. It felt good. It felt great. I'm not gonna lie, it felt great.
It did. Man, man, the Grammys. Did y'all win?
We did. I got hip hop album of the year. Hip hop album of the year. Yeah, hip hop album of the year.
Oh man, congratulations! That's a big.
Didn't get album of the year, which we should have. I think Macklemore stole that, but
he did. Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So that's the biggest of all, but yeah, now we'll take. Shoot, I'm happy to get the nomination. Happy to be a part of it. Happy to do it with cool people too. Rhapsody is Sis, Ninth is Bro, and we've done multiple records. So we did that. Then we worked on Rhapsody's project. They did a couple records for that out of there with Terrence Martin, and then Anderson .Paak did some joints there. So like, Ninth always comes through, always came through and bought people. He always bought like love, and for him, I know it was always important to show like black business. Like that was his thing. He was like, yo, we go around. There's a lot of studios. Y'all black owned. Y'all a couple. Y'all got y'all together. Like, I'm gonna bring everybody through just so they can see what's possible.
That's dope, man. And now you're in Atlanta.
Yeah.
You're married. Got children.
Multiple churns.
And now you are an advisor. What is that?
What is an advisor? It's a fancy way to say people get to call me a lot. Like just, over time you learn a lot. And in business and life, in relationships and access. And when now I see other people who are where I was when I first started.
Right.
And I had this, thank God. There were people like Mark Barnes and other mentors who definitely like took me under their wing and showed me the ropes. It's like, I can help you avoid half of the headaches that I know you're going to run into. Things you're not even thinking about, I can think about it for you.
Right.
And so like when someone's starting a business or they're starting a company or they're running a company, sometimes just having an advisory board, people who have been there, people with expertise, people who can help you connect some dots sometimes. If you need a lawyer, they're going to give you a good lawyer, someone who's in the industry, not like their homegirl who just graduated and doesn't know what they're doing. Because all those things, like we've been there, like you don't know what you don't know. But when you have someone around you who's done it before, it actually helps. So that's on advisor, is just somebody who can be like, yeah, bro, I know you're thinking to do that, but this is what could happen.
Right.
Because sometimes when you don't have that advisor and you're like, we all think everything we do is brand new, but there's nothing new under the sun. That was my mentor's like favorite phrase. It's like, if you want to learn how to change the industry, learn what happened before, because there's nothing new under the sun. If you can figure out what happened before, just do that now. Right. And that's all life is in general. Life, business, it's all the same. So if you ever going into business, like, and you're not sure about something, just find a person that's done it the best you've seen and ask them what their path was. And it's not one way to do something. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way. But I guarantee you they're going to say something in that conversation that you're not thinking about. And you may still do what you were going to do anyways, but at least you now have that thought.
Right. Man, I'm going to have my people hit your people. And you
got my direct line. You call me anytime.
That's what I mean. By my people hit your people, I mean me hit you. Because I'm, gotta talk to you about some things.
I'm always here.
Yeah. But thank you, man. This was dope. Dope.
Thank you.
This is great.
I'm proud of you, man. Like I said before we started, I've been watching, I've been listening, and I'm super proud of you, man. It takes a lot to do it. Like, the big thing in life and even with houses, just go. You ain't gotta. I didn't know what I was doing. Right, I'd be lying if I was like, man, I had it all figured out and I knew. Like, I did not. I was terrified every day doing it. I was terrified. Like, I just knew I was gonna look stupid because it's like, yo, like one day someone's gonna figure out I don't know what I'm doing. But the reality is, no one knows what they're doing. Like,
I still don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm a dad, but like I'm a dad for the first time, right? Jaden's about to be 17. I've never had a 17-year-old before, right? Like it's never had 3 kids before. It's like everything's new. So for me, like it's that's the beauty of it is like I see someone like you who's doing it, who's recording, who's putting it out, who's getting better, staying consistent. Those are the people that win. That's all it takes. As long as you're doing it all the time, eventually something gonna open up. You don't know which one of these conversations will be the one that like put you on your path, or someone watches it, or the right person sees it, or the interview blows up because of the right timing, or 10 years from now someone's gonna find archive of one of your interviews and use that in a film, and then like you just never know. Like I said with Ninth Wonder, the crazy thing about Ninth is I met Ninth because one of my best friends from high school shot Little Brother's music videos when I was in college. Really? So when he was at North Carolina A&T, he would call me down to help him shoot music videos in North Carolina. Like, so it's like the years that have to pass for people to understand, like the road to that Grammy didn't happen when I had House. The road to that Grammy happened 10 years before that. When my best friend was in college and he was like, yeah, I'm shooting this group called Little Brother. Can you come help me shoot? Like, it's like, yo, I never heard of Little Brother. What is that? Like Monte and then this dude named Ninth. It's like, I don't know them, but I just wanted to learn. I just want to go do something cool and support my boy. That relationship 10 years later becomes, hey man, you got a studio? Oh, you Pat's boy? Oh, let's go. So it's like you just never know how them dots gonna connect. But if you're just there and you ready and you working, it's a lot easier for someone to call your number. But if you're just sitting at home playing video games and looking at shoes online and scrolling on Instagram, it's really hard for your number to be called. It could happen, but it's just a lot more people doing that than they are actually recording and putting out their own content.
That's facts. And I know this is the king right here. So I already know I have to get his dead or alive. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first time tuning into the ArtsBlock podcast. Hello, I'm your wonderful, beautiful, melanated host, Eric Curry III. If this is your first time watching the ArtsBlock podcast, hello. This is your last time watching the ArtsBlock podcast, well, goodbye. But Dead or Alive is basically a segment where I ask the artist who they would like to work with that is dead or alive. Now, they could choose one artist. They can choose 100 artists. Please don't choose 100 artists because I still have to edit this podcast. But your Dead or Alive is special because you work with people. You work with a lot of people, right? You can't name any of them. You can't rework with nobody you've already worked with.
Okay.
Right? That's all right. So go ahead.
So I'm gonna start with the dead list. That's easy for me.
Okay.
I'm sure you heard this before, but Michael Jackson's on that list. Anything I would have worked with Michael. Yeah. Ray Charles, one of my favorite artists of all time, and Whitney Houston.
Ooh, that's
those are my 3. Like, of course, Biggie's cool, but like I feel like those 3 artists, I would have been a kid in a candy store. I would have literally those people I would have paid to work with. Like, don't even give me just take my money. I'm gonna sit in the room. And then Alive, there's actually a short list. The meaning just erased it, but I have like a hit list. So I love Tierra Whack.
Wow.
I'm gonna figure out a way to work with her somehow, like because I just think she's got a crazy dope energy.
She's dope.
And she's the kind of artist that you could have fun with a record and just like go anywhere. So she's on my hit list. I would love to work with this artist Yebba. I found her on a So Far video like 5 years ago, and her voice still to this day, like randomly, I'll play her records just like give me goosebumps. And then what's the dude named Toby out of Houston?
Hey, Toby.
Yo, like that dude, because I love the energy. I love like husband wife energy. I love how he spoon feeds the information in such a cool way. Like, I love his consistency. Like, I'm big on consistency, man. I just feel like people who are consistent win. So that's probably my short list. And then
dope, man.
There's an artist he said don't say anyone I work with. I have like now that I'm actually like producing and making records again, like actual records myself. If I could go with a DMV artist, I love Nucci.
Really?
Yeah, Nucci, the rapper.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he's an ode to the hip hop that I love. Like he's young, he's current, but he raps with substance. He raps like you listen to what he's saying. He raps in a way that he makes you listen to what every word and like why he's using those words.
Yeah.
So he's on my hit list. I just texted him. I was like, man, I'm gonna make a record for you. So yeah.
Hey, that's dope. Well, you do. Thank you. I know you're a busy man. Thank you for coming on to the podcast. This has been an amazing episode. Is there anything that you want to say to the people before we get off?
No, I mean, like I said earlier, just do it, man. I feel like if you're watching this podcast and you're watching a young man who grabbed the microphone, got his computer, and said, I'm gonna just start having conversations and putting them out, like that takes a level of vulnerability. Like, we all go through the same thing. Like, do I sound good? And do I look dumb? Are people gonna pay attention? What if I put it out on them and no one plays it but my mama? Like, you go through we all go through that. The biggest artist in the world to the startup, smallest artist in the world. But just do it. Like, and it don't have to be, if you're an artist listening to this, especially, please just do it. Like, we get in our own way too much. We get in our own heads, get in our own way. And the world needs more art. The world can never have too much art.
Message.
Ooh, ain't that the truth? And well, thank y'all, everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know how many people watching this. I'm just counting. But thank everybody who's watching this episode of ArtsBlock Podcast. I have been your host, Eric Curry III. You can follow me on Instagram at Eric Curry III. You can follow the podcast at ArtsBlock Podcast. All of Yudu's information and email and Instagram, that will be linked in the bio. Yeah, man. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, make sure you turn on post notifications so you can be notified every time I would drop a podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you give me a 5-star and a review. If you're listening anywhere else, shout out to you. Remember that artists never die. And I'll see y'all next week. Peace.